character of the president is going to determine whether or not this Constitution is employed the right way.
Okay, let's take this premise of character of presidents. Dwight D. Eisenhower cooed other governments. LBJ lied us into the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon bombed Cambodia when we were not at war with them. The Reagan administration armed Iraq, and then when Saddam Hussein gassed his own people, we were aware of it and we continued to arm them anyways because it was just a way to stick it to Iran. President Bush started the war on terror and did away with the idea that we needed congressional authorization for military action for presidents. President Obama drone striked and killed American citizens, started the drone war, which had a 90% civilian casualty rate, destroyed Libya, where we have open slave markets now. Donald Trump, who was already president once, seems like we survived him once already. I think we can do it again, but he increased drone strikes by over 400%. Joe Biden went to war in Yemen without congressional authorization. Senators were actually saying, hey, you kind of need some permission in order to continue military action. He just straight up ignored it.
Let's start with the debate. Was this a bad episode or the sign of a more serious condition?
It was a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted. He also lied 28 times. The way the debate ran, and I had a bad night.
You know, you say you were exhausted. You came, and you did have a tough month, but you came home from Europe about 11 or 12 days. Why wasn't that enough rest time, enough recovery time?
They did a test to see whether or not I had some infection. I didn't. I just had a really bad cold.
And did you ever watch the debate afterwards?
I don't think I did, no.
What were you experiencing as you were going through the debate? Did you know how badly it was going?
The whole way I prepared, nobody's fault, mine.
But it seemed like you were having trouble from the first question in, even before he spoke.
Well, I just had a bad night.
The fact that he asked him the question, did you watch the debate? It took him a second to recollect whether he did or not, and he said, I'm not sure. It's a pretty straightforward question, Mr. President. Did you watch the debate? And he's already saying Donald Trump's lying the whole time. Well, they both were lying up there. Candidates constantly lie about what they're going to do when they're in office and then do the exact opposite. I mean, we had President Obama saying he's going to uphold the law and even gave some indications that he was willing to prosecute the Bush administration. Well, it turns out President Obama violated the law too and kept around NSA spying, and then he drone striked 2 American citizens. There's been such a freak out with this Supreme Court ruling when presidents have been above the law for a long time, and I don't know how this is necessarily terrifying. I mean, George Bush said torture is no longer against international law, it's just a difference of opinion. So don't fall for fear tactics, being like, oh, the Supreme Court is being very partisan here, and just saying, hey, the presidents are basically kings and can violate the law. It's been that way for a very long time.
To people who are concerned about your age, and 50 million Americans watched that debate, it seemed to confirm fears they already had.
After that debate, I did 10 major events in a row, including till 2 o'clock in the morning after that debate. Did events like this today, large crowds, and so I just had a bad night. I don't know why.
Events where he's surrounded by his supporters, events where he's not actually challenged with questions from the press. He needs to give a 2-hour news conference where there's no teleprompter, no way to save him. Stand on your own feet, sink or swim, Mr. President. But going to scripted events and just having people shout in the crowds 4 more years who will vote Democrat no matter what, I mean, literally they could run a dead person, they'd vote Democrat. So you got to go out there, be challenged by the press, and to show that you're up to the job. Not just give 22-minute interviews and saying that's good enough.
How quickly did it come to you that you were having that bad night?
Well, it came to me as having a bad night when I realized that even when I was answering a question, even when they turned his mic off, he was still shouting. And I let it distract me. But I realized that I just wasn't in control.
That's the problem, Mr. President. You're not going to be in control all the time. If you can't handle Donald Trump speaking over you and trying to shout you down, these were the rules you agreed to, Mr. President, that if you didn't want him to be able to interrupt you, they cut his mic. And if he's still talking, you got to be able to ignore that distraction.
Had a headline on July 2nd, Biden's lapses are said to be increasingly common and worrisome. Here's what they wrote. People who have spent time with President Biden over the last few months or so said the lapses appear to have grown more frequent, more pronounced, and after Thursday's debate, more worrisome. Are you the same man today that you were when you took office 3.5 years ago?
In terms of successes, yes. I also was the guy who put together a peace plan for the Middle East that may be coming to fruition. I was also the guy that expanded NATO. I was also the guy that grew the economy. All the individual things that were done were ideas I had or I fulfilled. What I said when I ran was I wanted to do 3 things. Restore some decency to the office. Restore some support for the middle class instead of trickle-down economics built from the middle out and the bottom up. The way the wealthy still do fine, everyone does better. And unite the country.
Unite the country. Really? We've never been this divided. Right now, people can't look at other people as human beings who they just disagree with. Part of that's to blame on Donald Trump, but also the Democrats feed into it as well. Famously, Joe Biden said, if you aren't voting for me, you're not black. And that's why we have this political polarization where people don't actually vote for a candidate, they just vote against the other candidate because they hate them so much.
The last 3.5 years cost you physically, mentally, emotionally.
I just think it cost me a really bad night. This next term, I'm going to make sure we have straighten out the tax system. I'm going to make sure we're in a situation where we have health care for all people, where we're in a position where we have child care and elder care, free up, and all these things. The one thing I'm proudest of is, remember when my economic plan was put forward, a lot of the mainstream economists said it's not going to work. Well, guess what? We now have 16 Nobel laureates, 16 of them in economics, saying that Biden's next term would be, based on what he wants to do, enormous success. Trump's plan would cause a recession, would significantly increase inflation. I've made great progress, and that's what I plan on doing, and we can do this.
Okay, number one, not specific about anything, how he's going to give insurance to people. He said before he was president, he was going to guarantee everyone a public option for healthcare. He didn't even bother proposing it. So he's saying he's going to give us child care. Again, nothing specific. He's saying if Donald Trump gets elected, there's just going to be a recession and everything's going to go to hell. The problem with the Democrats is they're not acknowledging, like, hey, grocery prices are way too high. We've had inflation run hot for a very long time. And they keep touting saying, oh, look at all these jobs created. A lot of people are underemployed. They go get a degree out of college, and then they find out college degrees at this point are worthless unless you're a doctor or a lawyer. People can no longer afford houses and are expecting to live worse than their parents did. And I admire Joe Biden for at least being an optimist, or at least sounding optimistic, versus Donald Trump does just say, hey, the country's going to shit. We're not going to be a country anymore. If you watch my channel, don't buy into the politics of fear. If they're fear-mongering on the Republican side, don't believe it. If you want to vote for Donald Trump, believe that his policies will actually make America better. If you're going to vote for Joe Biden, vote for him because you actually believe in him. Don't buy the fear-mongering that Donald Trump is unilaterally somehow going to end democracy.
Do you dispute that there have been more lapses, especially in the last several months?
Can I run the 110 flat? No.
Are you more frail?
No.
I just had to point this out. Some may think it's unfair. When you saw at the end of the debate, Donald Trump just kind of walked off, versus Joe Biden's wife had to go up there and physically assist him going down the stairs. There's nothing wrong with getting old. It's going to happen to all of us. But don't believe if you're president of the United States, especially in these times, that doesn't wear on you. You can see before and after pictures after presidents have gone through 2 terms. They do not look good. And I think it's disingenuous to say that Joe Biden hasn't declined at all. And this is the problem with people who are declining in their later years. They don't want to accept it. And I think a lot of us wouldn't be willing to accept it. But to simply put Joe Biden out there, when what is required in order to have the strongest candidate is to go out there, not be on a teleprompter, actually do real interviews, not softball interviews with George Stephanopoulos, getting out there, campaigning, doing press conferences to show you're up for the job.
I know you spoke with your doctor after the debate. What did he say?
He said, he just looked at me and said, you're exhausted.
You know why he's exhausted? He's over 80 years old. This is why I think Joe Biden should just retire and go sit on a beach somewhere, enjoy the rest of his life, have all the ice cream you can eat, just how I would feel for my loved one.
Have you had a full neurological and cognitive evaluation?
I get a full neurological test every day.
Would you be willing to undergo an independent medical evaluation that included neurological and cognitive tests and release the results to the American people?
Every day I have that test. You know, not only am I campaigning, but I'm running the world. But we are the essential nation in the world. There's no day I go through that are not those decisions I have to make every single day.
And you have been doing that, and the American people have been watching, yet their concerns about your age and your health are growing. So that's why I'm asking, to reassure them, would you be willing to have the independent medical evaluation?
Answer the question,
Watch me
Biden.
there's a lot of time left in this campaign. It's over 125 days.
So the
I'll
answer,
make a decision.
the right answer right now is no, you don't want to do that, right?
Think how low the bar has become. We're asking ourselves whether the President of the United States should take a cognitive test. This is the guy in charge of the nuclear weapon arsenals, and he's refusing to take the test. Because if he was truly cognitively there and healthy, 100%, he hasn't changed at all in the last 4 years, I'd be like, bet. Take the cognitive test. prove to the American people that you're not declining at all. It was simply just one bad night, one bad debate. And I will say, I do not think that was just a one-off.
Elections are about the future, not the past. Can you serve effectively for the next 4 years?
I'm the guy that put NATO together. The future. No one thought I could expand it. I'm the guy that shut Putin down. I'm the guy that got 50 nations out, not only in Europe, outside of Europe as well, to help Ukraine. I don't want to take too much credit. I have a great staff.
He just said he had a great staff. And that's who I think is actually running the country right now. Joe Biden went to the G7 summit and the other leaders said Joe Biden is visibly struggling. And it's sad to see this because the adversaries of the United States know that Joe Biden is declining. And we may have Donald Trump as president. Even though I think Donald Trump makes some decent points when it comes to NATO, saying that there's a lot of people in NATO who don't pay the 2% minimum to actually have defense in NATO because and a lot of these countries have social safety nets that we don't have in the United States. A lot of these countries guarantee health care to their citizens. We don't have a guarantee of health care in this country. And let's take it as a person. Say if I stop paying my health insurance premiums, do you think they're going to cover me if I get sick? Probably not.
The point is, all that takes a toll. Do you have the mental and physical capacity to do it for another 4 years?
I believe so. I wouldn't be running if I didn't think I did. I'm running again because I think I understand best what has to be done. Take this nation to a completely new level. The decision recently made by the Supreme Court on immunity. You know, the next president of the United States, it's not just about whether he or she knows what they're doing. It's not about a conglomerate of people making decisions. It's about the character of the president.
Okay, let's take this premise of character of presidents. The Reagan administration armed Iraq, and then when Saddam Hussein gassed his own people, we were aware of it, and we continued to arm them anyways, because it was just a way to stick it to Iran. Dwight D. Eisenhower couped other governments. LBJ lied us into the Vietnam War. Richard Nixon bombed Cambodia when we were not at war with them. President Bush started the war on terror and did away with the idea that we needed congressional authorization for military action for presidents. President Obama drone striked and killed American citizens, started the drone war, which had a 90% civilian casualty rate, destroyed Libya, where we have open slave markets now. Donald Trump, who was already president once, seems like we survived him once already. I think we can do it again, but he increased drone strikes by over 400%. Joe Biden went to war in Yemen without congressional authorization. Senators were actually saying, hey, you kind of need some permission in order to continue military action. He just straight up ignored it. If someone's going to be president, they're going to do horrible things in the name of the security state in this country. So we've had presidents who already have blatantly ignored the Constitution and blatantly ignored the law. So I wouldn't use the card of moral character of president, because I'm sure Joe Biden would be fine with all those presidential actions as long as they weren't named Donald Trump.
Are you sure you're being honest with yourself when you say you have the mental and physical capacity to serve another 4 years?
Yes, I am, because, George, the last thing I want to do is not be able to meet that.
But are you being honest with yourself as well about your ability to defeat Donald Trump right now?
Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
I believe him. I believe he thinks he's the only one who could defeat Donald Trump. Unfortunately, we have 72% of Americans who think you do not have the mental capacity to be president anymore, let alone defeat Donald Trump. He was down in all the swing states before. Now he's even lower. He has a 36% approval rating. These are numbers that I do not think you can come back from. And it's unfortunate because I don't think Joe Biden was the worst president we've ever had. I wouldn't put him in the great category, but we've had presidents like George W. Bush who literally just upended everything because of the war on terror.
You think polling data is accurate as it used to be?
I don't think so, but I think when you look at all of the polling data right now, it shows that he's certainly ahead in the popular vote, probably even more ahead in the battleground states. And one of the other key factors there is it shows that in many of the battleground states, the Democrats who are running for Senate and the House are doing better than you are.
I remember them telling me the same thing in 2020. I can't win. The polls show I can't win. Remember 2020, the red wave was coming.
2022.
Before the vote, I said, that's not going to happen. We're going to win. We did better in an off year than almost any incumbent president ever has done.
All that is true, but 2020 was a close race.
Yes.
And your approval rating has dropped significantly since then. I think the last poll I saw was at about 36%. Wouldn't a clear-eyed political calculus tell you that it's going to be much tougher to win in 2024?
Not when you're running against a pathological liar. Not when he hadn't been challenged in a way that he's about to be challenged.
You haven't been challenged either, sir. You've given less interviews than any recent president. But now you got to go out there and actually prove it. And I do not think you can overcome these numbers.
Not when people.
You've had months to challenge him.
Oh, sure I had months, but I was also doing a hell of a lot of other things, like wars.
Do you really believe you're not behind right now?
All the pollsters I talk to tell me it's a toss-up.
Just when you look at the reality, though, Mr. President, I mean, you won the popular vote in 2020, but it was still deadly close.
I don't think anybody's more qualified to be president or win this race than me.
He just can't accept it, man. He just can't accept it. Look at all these polls that said I was down. Well, I don't believe him. He's doing a lot better than I thought he would, but keep in mind, this is a 22-minute interview without hostile questions. I wouldn't consider these hostile questions.
Part of your case against Donald Trump is that he's only out for himself. How do you respond to critics who say that by staying in the race, you're doing the same thing?
Well, I don't think those critics know what they're talking about. Trump is a pathological liar. Have you ever seen anything Trump did that benefited somebody else, not him?
He passed the First Step Act, which actually let nonviolent criminals out of our jails. He actually tried to talk to North Korea, but now look, they're running into the arms of Russia. He's trying to get NATO to actually keep its commitments when it comes to 2% actual military spending, so it's fair to the United States. I think all presidents do good and bad things, including Donald Trump.
As I said, they pointed out in that debate he lied 27, 28 times the times, or whatever number, over 20 times. This is a guy who told us to put bleach in our arms to deal with COVID, with over a million people died. This is a guy who talks about wanting to get rid of the health care provision we put in place, who wants to give the power back to big pharma to be able to charge exorbitant prices for drugs. This is a guy who wants to undo every single thing I've done. Every single thing.
I understand that. I understand that's why you want to stay in the race. But have you convinced yourself that only you can defeat him?
I convinced myself of two things. I'm the most qualified person to beat him, and I know how to get things done.
You can be convinced that you cannot defeat Donald Trump. Will you stand down?
It depends if the Lord Almighty comes down and tells me that, I might do that.
That Senator Mark Warner is assembling a group of senators together to try and convince you to stand down because they don't think you can win.
Listen to others. Joe Biden's not listening to others. I think the people who could truly end this, two categories. His donors just say, we're not giving you any more money. That's your life's blood. If we don't give you any more money, Donald Trump's going to be president anyways. Or two, his family actually has to step up and do what's right for the country. Other than that, he's just going to be stubborn. He's not going to accept the polls that he's down. He's not going to accept that most Americans don't think he should be president anymore. And hell, he's not even going to accept that 4 years of the presidency has worn him down.
If the Lord Almighty came down and said, Joe, get out of the race, I'll get out of the race. The Lord Almighty's not coming down.
I agree that the Lord Almighty is not going to come down. But if you are told reliably from your allies, from your friends and supporters in the Democratic Party, in the House and the Senate, that they're concerned you're going to lose the House and the Senate if you stay in, what will you do?
I'm not going to answer
Ignore it.
that question. It's
Why
gonna
not?
happen.
So certain.
What's your plan to turn the campaign around?
How many people do you draw crowds like I drew today?
I don't think you want to play the crowd game. Donald
Yeah.
Trump can draw big crowds. There's no question about that.
You can draw a big crowd, but what does he say? Who does he have? I've not seen what you're proposing.
You haven't seen the fall off in the polls. You haven't seen the reports of discontent in the Democratic Party, House Democrats, Senate Democrats.
I've seen it from the press.
You know, I've heard from dozens of your supporters over the last few days, and a variety of views, I grant you that. But the prevailing sentiment is this. They want you to go with grace. What do you say to them?
I say the vast majority are not where those folks are.
72% of registered voters think that you should leave. You're not fit to be president anymore. It's not me being mean. It's not me being an asshole and just saying you're the worst president ever and I'm a Donald Trump supporter. It's me saying as a concerned citizen that I think it would be healthy for our democracy if the Democrats would stop putting their thumb on the scale and give another candidate a chance. Because at this point, I just think Donald Trump's going to be president if Joe Biden stays in. Whether or not you love that or hate that, that's up to you.
Mr. President, I've never seen a president at 36% approval get reelected.
Well, I don't believe that's my approval rate. That's not what our polls show.
And if you stay in and Trump is elected and everything you're warning about comes to pass, how will you feel in January?
I feel as long as I gave it my all and I did the goodest job as I know I can do. That's what this is about. The United States and the world is at an inflection point where the things that happen in the next several years are going to determine what the next 6-7 decades look like. And who's going to be able to hold NATO together like me? Because you're going to have now the NATO conference here in the United States next week. Come listen. See what they say.
Mr. President, thanks for your time.
I'll ask you, did that reassure you? It was only 22 minutes long, man. You're gonna have to do a lot more than that to convince me after that debate performance that you should run the country another 4 years.